We're going back almost 10 years ago now, but one morning I dropped my son off at school and then drove over to a nearby 7-Eleven with my infant daughter. It was pretty early in the morning, so there were only one or two other customers, and one of them was this older-looking guy with a walker who was slowly making his way around the store. I didn't pay him too much attention other than feeling kind of sorry for him. Then I picked up the few items I needed, then headed out to my car. Right as I'm putting my daughter in her car seat, I hear a voice behind me. I turn, and it's the old man with the walker, only there's something weirdly different about him than when I saw him in the 7-Eleven. He was walking upright, not leaning on the walker, and his voice sounded much younger than you would have expected from just looking at him. I remember all he said was, "Cute kid." Then as I turned around, I only got the slightest look at the guy and his brand new posture before he slammed the walker into the back of my legs. The force made my knees buckle, and I almost fell right on top of my young daughter. I'm not exactly the tallest woman in the world, so the height reduction from my knees buckling had me falling forward into my open car door, and I had really tried not to crush her as I fell. I honestly thought that he was trying to get me, which was bad enough, but when he grabbed me by the hair and started to drag me up and off of my daughter, I realized he was trying to get to her instead. I honestly didn't think that I could get any more terrified, but the realization that he was actually trying to take my infant daughter away from me was just too much to bear. I remember letting out the loudest, most ear-splitting scream I've ever let out in my life, begging him not to take my baby. He was so much stronger and faster than he looked, and I guess that was all part of his fiendish scheme to have everyone let their guards down around him. It honestly seems like divine intervention now that I look back at it. But someone was just pulling into the small parking lot just as he almost had a hand on my daughter, and seeing the struggle had them instinctively honking their horn over and over in a bid to break it up. I think they figured it was just an incident of spousal abuse or something, because they were just honking and didn't get out of their car until I screamed over and over again, "He's trying to take my baby." The moment they heard that, they came bursting out of their driver's side door. But then the guy sprinted past the passenger side and out towards the main highway. The second he did, another car comes speeding up and stops by him, which I first thought might have been another person coming to tackle him or something. But instead, the guy climbs into the second car and it speeds off with a screech of its tires. What horrified me in the aftermath was that it was quite clearly a well-planned and almost perfectly executed attempt to kidnap my daughter, and I wouldn't be surprised in the least bit if it had worked on a previous occasion. After the kind stranger calmed me down, they helped me call the cops as I tried my best to calm my daughter down in turn. She was still too young to really know what was going on, but she picked up on my distress enough to be wailing and crying until I managed to lull her off to sleep. The cops who arrived at the 7-Eleven a short while after said that they'd never heard of such a thing happening there before, but they were able to check the street cameras outside the 7-Eleven to try and get a clear image of the getaway car's number plate. I stuck around long enough to find out that the car's plates came back as stolen, and the cop I spoke to said that there was a good chance that they just ditched the vehicle somewhere after wiping it down for prints. If they had already planned such a detailed operation out, there was a good chance they planned for that too. The only saving grace was that the officer assured me that my report was a step towards catching them. A small step, but a step nonetheless. The horrifying experience I went through that morning wasn't for nothing, as not only did the cops now have a description of the guy who tried to do the kidnapping, but their failure to kidnap my daughter meant that they'd probably hesitate before trying the same plan again. I took a lot of comfort in that idea, and if it wasn't for the cop taking the time to reassure me of that, I don't think I'd have dealt with the trauma of it as half as well as I did in the months that followed. But I did a lot of praying too. Desperate prayers that whoever had planned such a horrifying kidnap would never, ever be successful, and that no one else would have to endure the pure horror that I had.
My name is Fiona, and I'm 20 years old. I'm a college student who's studying medicine. Here, I and my family live in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. I have some friends, but I'm only close to two, a guy and a girl. The guy lives in my neighborhood, and his name's Diego. And then there's Maria, my best friend. I basically tell her everything since we are very close. She is also my classmate, so we go to college together. Every Friday, the three of us go to a local Taco Bell. I guess you could say it's a tradition of some sort. About a year ago, as the three of us entered the Taco Bell, I immediately noticed a guy working the till. I had never seen him before. I don't know if there was any other word to describe him. But he was fine. My heart began to flutter, and immediately I had a crush on him. We approached him to take our order. I just stood there starstruck, words failing to come out of my mouth. I just stared at him.
May I take your order?
I snapped out of the trance.
Yeah, can we have 3 beefy nacho burritos, please?
No problem. Anything else?
No, that's all. Thanks. My name's Fiona, by the way.
I'm Christian.
Oh, are you religious?
Yeah, I pray to the Lord every day. Haha.
Oh, right. Haha.
You free this weekend?
Well, yeah, I guess.
What's your number?
I got out a pen and paper and scribbled down my number. I gave it to him quickly. Then, I awkwardly walked back to where my friends stood. While we waited for our order, Diego gave me an eye roll, whereas Maria started hyping me up. A few minutes later, we got our food and we started eating, carrying on our weekly tradition. A day after, I got a text message that read,
Hey, this is Christian from Taco Bell.
I quickly replied,
Hey, it's Fiona. How are you?
I'm doing good. Are you free tomorrow?
Yeah, I should be.
Cool, let's get coffee tomorrow morning.
Okay, can't wait.
I was brimming with anticipation, so much so that I could barely sleep that night. It was 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I headed downtown to meet Christian. My heart beat faster than every step I took. Finally, I was at the entrance of our local coffee shop. I saw him at a table. He smiled at me. I smiled back. I nervously walked through the entrance and towards him. We then went to the front till and ordered 2 lattes. Once we got our order, we sat down at a table and started talking.
So, what do you do for work?
Well, I actually go to college, and I'm studying medicine right now. It's stressful, but I've always wanted to become a doctor and help people.
Is that so? I bet it's not as stressful as working at Taco Bell, huh? God, I hate it there. It drives me mad every day. Just standing there while a bunch of fat bastards order their stupid tacos. They're always like, "Excuse me, my tacos are too cold. Excuse me, can I talk to the manager?" God, I hate those stupid Karens. Just eat what you're given. God damn it.
For the next 10 minutes or so, Christian continued rambling on about his struggles in life. This created a huge ruckus amongst the whole coffee shop. I had no idea why he was sat here venting on a first date. I was getting weirded out now and wanted to get the hell out of there. Any attraction I had before was instantly killed.
Look, it was nice meeting you, but I really have to go somewhere.
Wait, don't go yet. We're just getting to know each other.
Sorry, I really need to go.
I stood up to leave. Suddenly, he grabbed my waist tightly from the back.
Please, don't go. I need you to stay.
Get off me, please!
I started screaming. Luckily, a bunch of customers intervened and ripped the guy off of me. And with that, I bolted out of the place, absolutely fear-stricken. What I hoped would be a first date turned out to be a nightmare. Once I got home, I immediately blocked the guy's number before he got the chance to message me. Over the next few days, I would constantly get flooded with messages from unknown numbers. Most likely they were from Christian. I would see his messages, but immediately block him. Some days he would confess his love to me. Other days he would send rude or threatening messages. I was so scared to do anything. I didn't even tell anyone. The next Friday, I went to Taco Bell with my friends again. This time, they ordered for me, while I sat on a table facing away from the till, more scared than ever. I didn't even want to see Christian's face again. Soon my friends came over to the table and we started eating. After 10 minutes or so, I had to use the restroom. So, I quickly made my way over to the restroom, without batting an eye towards Christian. As I was washing my hands, I suddenly heard a knock on the door.
Sorry, give me a second.
Then, I heard Christian. He started laughing maniacally.
Come out, wherever you are. Get out, Fiona. We still haven't finished our first date.
What the hell? Get away from me, or I'm calling the police.
That was a bluff, because my phone was still at the table. He started banging the door loudly. I was shaken to the core, and I had no idea what to do. I crept to the back of the room, with my back against the wall. I just shouted out at the top of my lungs.
Help! He's trying to break in! Please help me!
Soon, I heard a few scuffles outside the restroom. About 10 minutes had passed. It felt like the longest 10 minutes of my life. Thankfully, I heard Diego on the other side.
Come out. It's safe now.
I clicked the door lock open and slowly peered out of the door. My friends, Diego and Maria, stood there with a look of concern. We got back to our table, and from the glass walls, we could see Christian outside, handcuffed and pinned against a police car. I took a sigh of relief. Finally, I could rest assured that I wouldn't be harassed by this guy anymore. Diego revealed that he had heard my screams, so he was the first one to come to my rescue. He tackled Christian to the floor and pinned him down until the cops arrived. I thanked him from the bottom of my heart. Soon, over a couple of weeks, I started to develop feelings for Diego, and he felt the same towards me. Fast forward to today, we've been together for a year now. So, ladies and gentlemen, just know that love can sometimes come from places that you least expected. And yeah, we never saw that Christian guy ever again.
I used to work at a 7-Eleven here in the United States, and the scariest thing that ever happened to me there was also the single most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me in my life. It happened on a particularly quiet night, and I was still kind of hungover from going out drinking the night before, so I wasn't even paying attention when the guy walked into the store. I heard the door sliding open. I heard his footsteps as he walked up to the counter, and then right when I was about to lift my head up to ask him what he wanted, he just slammed something down on the counter in front of me. I remember the first thing being the red splatter on my t-shirt. It was plain white, and the moment his hand impacted on the counter, all these little red specks appeared on my shirt. I already recoiled from the shock of having his hand slammed down in front of me, but when I saw what he just slammed down next to the register, I recoiled even further. It was a tongue, an actual tongue. Even though it was soaked in blood, I could recognize the deep ridge running down the middle of it. It sounds like such a cliche when I think about it now, but I now know what people mean when they say that they were frozen in fear. The whole thing was an assault on my senses, and I think it just short-circuited my fight-or-flight mechanism to the point where I just didn't know what to do. Then the look in the guy's eyes as he stared at me, so calm but intense, with eyes so wide and unblinking that it was like he didn't have eyelids at all. It was only when he spoke that I actually found the will to move, and all he said to me was, "Call 911." I bolted into the back office, locked the door behind me, and immediately called the cops. All the while, I watched the guy on the cameras just standing there at the register. He didn't move at all. He just seemed to be looking down and staring at the mess he'd left on the counter. And given the gruesome nature of my emergency, there was a police patrol car and 2 cops pulling up outside in just a matter of minutes. The guy didn't put up any kind of fight when they moved to arrest him. He just held his wrists, allowed them to put the handcuffs on him, then let the cops take him away. Once he was safely out of the store, I walked out of the office, trying not to look at what was on the counter, then told the cops everything I knew. It obviously wasn't all that much, but as I was talking to them, I noticed a few more police surrounding a car in the parking lot that still had the door open. I called the store manager from the McDonald's across the street, telling him that the cops had to close the store because it was an active crime scene. They rushed down to see what was going on, even though it was their day off, and after telling them what had happened, I went home to decompress. From what I heard later, the guy had gotten into an argument with his wife while out driving somewhere. Then at some point, he'd snapped pulled up into a parking lot, stabbed her to death, then cut her tongue out. Then, for some reason, he picked our 7-Eleven to walk into to slam the tongue he'd cut out of her mouth down onto the countertop. I was allowed to take a little bit of time off of work after the whole thing, as I just couldn't face going back there so soon. Even when I did go back, I was on edge the whole time for my first couple of shifts, and I just couldn't seem to shake the image of that bloody tongue just lying on the countertop right in front of me. The thing I just can't seem to shake is that it wasn't enough for the guy to actually stab and kill his own wife. He had to reach into her mouth afterwards and cut her tongue out. How completely insane with fury does a person have to be to do that? Like, what could possibly possess someone to do something so horrifying to their own spouse? The guy didn't look like a monster either. He didn't look evil or deranged. All that gave his mental state away was that crazy look in his eyes, the one that had me frozen in fear. It just haunts me that seemingly normal people are capable of things like that.
When working at Hooters, it's normal to get a few stares from old, lecherous men and young hotshots alike. I didn't mind mostly. I knew what I was signing up for, and the pay was decent. The most I ever got was the occasional pinch on the ass, and a quick word with the manager normally sorted those individuals out. But one night, the restaurant was especially quiet, and expecting little traffic, the manager dismissed a few of us early, leaving behind only myself and this other girl, Miranda, to close up when the time came around. The manager gave us the keys and thanked us for the day's work. I was anxious to leave, but rent this month was tight, and I needed that sweet overtime to make up for it. I was just finishing up one guy's order when out of the corner of my eye, I watched curiously as some old dude, complete in a trucker's fit, classic tartan coat and baseball hat, fiddled with something in his hand, a piece of metal glinting as it spun. Ignoring it, I wrote the last part of the customer's order and hurried back to the kitchen. All the cooking staff were gone, and it was up to Miranda and I to fill out whatever was needed. A task made more difficult by the fact that I had no idea where she was. An hour in, Miranda finally appeared. She looked shaken, pale and twitchy. I rolled my eyes and continued scrubbing the tables. I knew she was a druggie and figured that she'd spent the past hour shooting up in the toilets. By now, the restaurant was sparse. There were only 2 people left, that trucker dude, and another guy idly texting on his phone in the corner suite, facing away from us. Outside was pitch black, and the clock read 11 p.m., 1 more hour to go. The trucker was staring at me. I just knew it was something I picked up on the job. Anytime I bent over, had my back turned, those eyes were staring greedily. But this time, there was no manager to protect me, only Miranda. And I figured, why not give the old fart a show? He'd be gone soon anyway. But there was something instinctively repulsive about this guy in particular, the way a little spit trail dribbled from the corner of his mouth, or the fact that one of his eyes was significantly larger than the other, bloodshot and throbbing almost. The way he was looking at me, I thought it'd explode. I continued brushing under the table next to his, and noticed that same metal piece he was fiddling with earlier. My heart dropped. It was unmistakably a small revolver. I cursed myself for not checking properly earlier, and continued to work, my mind set on leaving as soon as the chance arose. But there was no way out other than the front door, which he had a clear view of. And the back was locked by the manager, as was the usual procedure. Head pounding, I realized the only way was through the toilets, a small window to fit through. But Miranda was once again gone, and I cussed her out under my breath. Would the trucker suspect something if both of us were gone? Before I could make my choice, I felt a cold, metal sensation to my temple. Raising my eyes, I became very wary of the gun pressed against my head, the trucker smiling wickedly.
Where's your friend?
He asked, in a low growl. I couldn't speak, instead pointing nervously towards the bathrooms.
Go and get her. You've got a minute.
I steadily made my way over, but just before entering, I saw the texting guy, oblivious to what was happening. He was a looker, a real heartthrob, and I even had to think twice before coming back to the situation we were in. I realized I had an opportunity. Pretending to slip onto the table, I hurriedly whispered, "Call 911." Without waiting for an answer, I recovered and walked into the toilets, unaware of the dismissive head shake he had given me and the trucker who had risen from his place. Blocking off the door with a broom against the handle, I automatically made a beeline for the middle stall where the narrow window was. There was a pounding at the door, and I knew my time was limited. Swinging open the stall, I doubled over, hand covering my mouth. Sure enough, Miranda was there, or at least, what was left of her. It was as if she had been cut in every part possible. The only way I could recognize her was the vague Hooters icon on her chest. I barely withheld the urge to scream, and became aware that the banging had stopped. I waited, holding my breath. I didn't realize it then, but 5 minutes had passed before I could finally move again. Gathering myself, I climbed over her corpse and tried to open the window. It was locked. I bashed myself against the glass, but it was no good. Nothing I did would open when I heard a bang, a gunshot echoing for a few seconds, and then an eerie quiet. I opened the door and was met by silence. Arming myself with the broom, I took each step warily, checking every corner. Both the texter and the trucker were gone, and the front door wide open. I took my chances and ran. I only managed a few yards before I tripped, sending my body sprawling to the floor. My blood froze. This was it. I was gonna die. When suddenly, a wet sensation came over my hands and knees. I looked back and saw the bloody mess that was the trucker, splayed out on the floor behind me, cut in the same exact way as Miranda was, his gun inches away. I tried pushing myself up, but the blood was everywhere, and to my horror, I kept slipping and sliding, getting it all over my clothes. A shadow fell over me, and looking up, I trembled to see the texter, a large machete in his hand, his face contorted into a twisted smile. Grabbing me by my hair, he lifted me up, and despite all my shrieking and struggling, nothing could free me.
"Don't worry, I've called the police."
He cackled, his handsome features contorted into an ugly, cross-eyed craze.
"They'll only find what's left of you."
As the machete grew closer and closer, I screamed louder and louder, until a much more deafening sound filled the room. The man let go of me, gasping and stumbling to the side. Behind him, the trucker held an outstretched arms, in his hand the smoking gun, lying flat on the floor. With a gargle, he collapsed once more, this time for good. I fainted, no longer able to take the stress, darkness overcoming my vision. The police arrived not soon after, as the texter had promised, and they whisked my unconscious body away into custody. The next few months, I spent in therapy, trying to overcome what had happened that night. They told me in small chunks over time of how the trucker had been an undercover cop, tracking this serial killer they called the Pretty Carver. He had never meant to hurt me. He just wanted both Miranda and I out of the way before he made his final move, which would prove to be fatal for him. Standing before his grave, I left flowers and softly thanked him. But on the car drive home, I could only think of one thing. They had never found the Pretty Carver's body. They were almost certain he had died. The trail of blood he had left was so substantial no human could have survived it. But I remember it, the very last thing I had saw before I blacked out. He limped out of the restaurant and into the darkness. He kept limping and struggling until he had disappeared completely. Surely he had died, right? Yeah, that's what I'll believe. After all, I've got bigger things on my mind now, like how my shift's starting soon.
My name is Alexander, but everyone calls me Alex for short. I'm a 21-year-old student in Romania, currently studying software engineering. Outside my university life, I live in a hostel far from the university. In the hostel, I live with a friend who's a total badass. His name is Billy, and he's notorious in clubs and around girls. Our hostel was in a quiet town with very little fun, so we had to go travel to the city for that. So, one day, Billy and I decided to go to the city to grab a bite to eat. It took about 30 minutes to get there by bus. As we arrived at the bus stop, we noticed a Taco Bell truck parked on the pavement. We got off the bus and approached the truck. My roommate Billy wanted tacos after seeing the truck, so he knocked at the windows, but sadly no one was there. So instead, we ventured off into the shopping center and went to the Taco Bell store and had tacos there. Soon after that outing, life carried on as normal. I was busy studying for my upcoming finals, while Billy went partying every week. I was exhausted with my work schedule, having to maintain my grades while working a part-time job and hitting the gym every day. So, about a week before my finals, I decided to treat myself. I went out to the city with good old Billy to have a bite or two. As we got off the bus, once again we noticed the Taco Bell truck parked on the pavement. We approached it. Finally, it was open. As we got to the truck, we were welcomed by a Taco Bell employee. He was a large, well-built man, and he was a pretty good-looking guy. He looked like he could be a model or actor. Definitely not someone who worked at a fast food restaurant.
Welcome to Taco Bell. Can I take your order?
Hi. Yeah, can I get 2 Crunchwrap Supremes?
We don't have any ingredients, goddammit! Are you trying to piss me off?
I was shocked, completely taken aback. I didn't know what to say. The guy started twitching his head uncontrollably. Then, he was suddenly normal again.
Sorry. Yes, of course. Anything else?
No, thank you. As we waited for our order, Billy and I kept a safe distance away from the truck. We started conspiring as to what the guy's problem was, and why he acted so weirdly. Was he on drugs? Was he crazy? Or was he just having a bad day? Nevertheless, we looked past it. We got our food and began to devour the tacos. The taste was slightly different to what I was used to. But still, it tasted good enough, probably because I hadn't eaten for 2 days. However, Billy, on the other hand, wasn't having it.
Alex, I'm telling you, this tastes awful.
Billy, it's not that bad. If you're not having your taco, I'll have it. So, I devoured Billy's taco as well. It felt pretty good in the moment, but my toilet said otherwise later that night. 2 weeks had passed, and finally I had finished all my finals for university. During that time period, I had completely shut myself off from any social interaction or social media use. So, I was like a complete zombie by the end of it. But hey, at least I was on track to becoming a software engineer by the start of fall. So, to celebrate, what better place to go than Taco Bell? Once again, Billy and I headed off to the city. We got off at the bus stop. However, we didn't see the Taco Bell truck. It had completely vanished. So, we had to go all the way to the mall once again. We got to the place and ordered 2 Crunchwrap Supremes. When I took a bite, I noticed that there was a huge difference in taste compared to the one we had from the truck. After we finished our tacos, Billy made some small talk with a cute Taco Bell employee.
So, what happened to the Taco Bell truck downtown?
There's only one Taco Bell in this entire city. Did you not hear the news?
Billy stared at me wide-eyed. I stood completely frozen. If this were true, we were doomed. That guy from the truck could have put anything in those tacos. I whipped out my phone and started scouring the internet about a Taco Bell truck in Bucharest, Romania. And instantly I found an article by the largest news outlet in Romania. The article read, "Hitman serves customers human meat." 25-year-old Marius Iliescu has been sentenced to life imprisonment after police found evidence that he had assassinated a 50-year-old construction manager and served up his remains in a fake Taco Bell truck. He confessed everything about the horrendous and despicable crime in his statement.
He deserved it. He had it coming for him. After what he did to my father, making him work in unsafe conditions. He died, falling from a scaffolding. So, the only answer was revenge. I set up a food truck and spied on the man who let my father die, every day. I followed his every footstep and every action he took. One day I had enough. As he was walking through an alleyway, I stabbed him and hauled him in a briefcase. And yeah, I chopped him up and served him to some unlucky people.
After reading the whole article, I was absolutely horrified. I was absolutely disgusted, having remembered I had eaten 2 whole tacos, made of human meat. I gagged and threw up all over the floor. The way in which this guy described his deed seemed so casual, as if it wasn't a big deal. I mean, yeah, I get it. You're devastated you lost your dad to some evil bastard. But is murdering them going to solve your problem? How mentally far gone must you be to think of such an evil plan? This story will haunt me forever, and the fact that I ate human meat will never leave my mind. And since that day, I have never stepped foot inside of a Taco Bell.
I have been working as a waitress at a restaurant called Hooters. It was the start of my 5th month working there. That day, we weren't as busy as usual. Out of 23 tables, only 6 were occupied. They were our regulars, calling their favorite waitress to serve food to them. I wasn't particularly busy, unlike everyone else, until the doorbell rang and a man dressed in all black, dirty clothes walked inside. His hair was greasy and his eyes and teeth had a yellow tint to them. He seemed to be in his 40s. I didn't want to serve him, but not having a choice, I dragged myself to him and gave him my best smile since he sat on one of my tables. While I took his order, I could feel him eyeing me up and down. Even after I left to give his order to the counter manager, I could still feel his cold stare on me. I pretended to be very busy so he wouldn't call me over, which actually worked. Until I had to bring his order to him. He asked me if I could sit and talk with him. We did chat with our regular customers, but he wasn't a regular, and he creeped me out. I apologized politely and then started to clean the tables. The entire time he sat there eating, his gaze was on me. I know this because I snuck a few peeks just to make sure I wasn't paranoid. After finishing his food, he left me a huge tip. The next day, he came to the restaurant at the same time and sat on my table again. I took his order, and as I was about to leave, he pulled me into his lap, whispering into my ear,
"I'm going to be a regular here, so stay on Daddy's lap."
Both shocked and disgusted by the gesture, I quickly stood up. I was about to walk away, when I changed my mind and sat across from him, thinking he did give me a good tip. I smiled at him and started talking, asking about his day and stuff. He told me a lot of things about himself, but what bothered me was that he told me that he lived 3 hours away from this place, and drove every day, just to see me. We talked a bit more before I went off to serve another table. Later, when I looked at the table he was at, he had already left. I was surprised that he had left me $300, which was double the amount I had received a day before. Days went by. He used to come at least 3 times a week, and would always sit on my table. I would sit and talk to him for a while, before I would attend to other customers. He would sit there finishing his food and heading off, leaving a huge tip. This carried on for a few more weeks. I was still repulsed by the man. But he did give me a good tip each time, so I put up with his antics. However, on one particular week, the man suddenly stopped coming to Hooters. I was mildly disappointed, but at the same time, I was relieved that I didn't have to put up with him for that week. However, that wasn't the strangest part of this story. On the last day of that week, I had just come back home from an 8-hour shift at 12 a.m. As I got ready for bed, I noticed that my pillows had been rearranged. That was weird. I lived alone. And I definitely didn't make my bed like that. I picked up one of my pillows, when I realized that there was an envelope underneath it. Inside, there was a note that read,
"Hello, sweetie. It's Daddy. Sorry I didn't see you this week. I'm moving out of state, so I left a little surprise in your closet."
I immediately realized who it was. It was the same creepy guy from Hooters. My legs started to buckle, and my lips started to quiver, as I turned my gaze towards my closet. In the small crack between the 2 doors, I could see the same yellow eyes and the same yellow teeth smiling at me. I fell back towards the ground in shock.
Please, don't hurt me.
The man came out of the closet and edged towards me. I had no idea what he was going to do. I just sat there motionless. He knelt down in front of me, with his hand stretched out to me. He put his hand on my shoulder and kissed my forehead. And then he casually strolled out of my apartment. I still sat there quivering in fear for at least 20 minutes. I could barely describe in words what had just happened. I was confused, disgusted, angry, but afraid. Despite all the emotions I was feeling, I couldn't muster up the courage to report this to the police. However, I never saw that man again. And since then, I had quit being a Hooters girl and instead, I got a job at a local coffee shop. I hope people listening can understand that sometimes, the money isn't worth your safety and well-being.
Back in the year 2018, I was still a university student, and to support myself, I worked part-time at a 7-Eleven here in my home of Chiodacho. Since the new school year hadn't quite started yet, I was still working night shifts, as despite the name, the 7-Eleven here is always open 24 hours. I tried to take advantage of the quiet nights by getting a head start on my studies, but that didn't stop the nights from being incredibly boring. So when I wasn't studying or serving the odd customer who came in, I was cleaning the store down. That's part of my nightly duties anyway, but then it becomes a real benefit during the nighttime shifts, and I can use up at least an hour each time I wipe down all the shelves, fridges, and displays. So one night, I'm cleaning the store when a customer comes in and starts browsing through some of the stock. I rush back behind the counter to serve him, but he told me that there was no rush, and he might be a while picking out some cold tea for his coworkers, as he too was working the nighttime shift as a security guard for a nearby apartment building. I thanked him for his thoughtfulness, then went back to what I was doing, which was cleaning down one of the refrigerator windows. I picked up my cloth and spray and began wiping down the fridge again when, suddenly, the entire store begins to gently vibrate. At first, it felt like that there was some kind of very large vehicle passing the store outside, like a tank or something. I know that might sound crazy, but that's what I thought at first. But then when it began to get more intense and everything on the shelves started to rattle and shake, one single word went through my head. Jishin, which means earthquake. The next thing I remember was turning with the intent of running back to the register to take cover under the counter, but as I turned, I saw the security guard running at me incredibly fast. I didn't know what he was planning on doing, but when he shoved me back to the ground, I found myself overcome with angry surprise, thinking, "What did you do that for?" Then, before I could even ask him what he was thinking, a pallet of glass bottles came crashing down from above the fridge I was cleaning, which is where we kept all the spares that would act as replacements for the fridge units. I'm not completely sure how heavy one of those are, but I know they're certainly heavy enough to cause some serious and permanent damage if one hit me on the head at those speeds. And it landed right where I'd been standing if the security guard hadn't shoved me out of the way. Suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore, not in the slightest, and all that fury changed into the purest form of gratitude I'd ever experienced in my life. I knew I had to repay it, and we trained to take cover under the reinforced counter in case of an earthquake, since it will protect us from any falling debris. I shouted at the man to follow me to the counter, and we both rushed towards it as best we could, as all kinds of things fell from their shelves while the floor shook violently beneath our feet. We took cover there for the next few minutes, and although it felt like far longer, the store stopped shaking after maybe only 30 to 40 seconds. There's no doubt in my mind how that security guard saved my life, or at least saved me from some serious and irreparable brain injuries. It makes me wonder what would have happened if he hadn't have walked into that store that night. I'd have been all alone when the earthquake hit. There's a good chance that I'd be dead, having joined the list of 40-plus people who died that night when the earthquake struck, or at least not in a fit state to write this email to you. I wasn't a believer in fate or destiny before that night, but now, I'm not so sure.